Hey there, this is Maria from English Without Fear. Today I'm talking to teachers. Yes, you dear souls who teach, coach, tutor English language learners. I want to talk to you about how much you educate your students regarding how they are acquiring a language. What kind of training background do you give them in brain research theory or language acquisition processes?
English Without Fear, where you can learn to speak English naturally through listening to stories.
Yes, we teachers need to educate our students, and if they're children, their parents, and our other world language colleagues and administrators. We need to educate them about how we acquire language as human beings. Since most world language teachers, including English, ESL teachers, since most of them teach through the old-fashioned grammar rule textbook means, using that kind of methodology, people don't understand language acquisition. Our students don't understand. So it is up to us to help them, to educate them. What am I talking about? What kind of education? And how much time is this going to take? These are all good questions. What works best is to give our students just a little taste, a little morsel, a little tidbit frequently of what it takes to acquire a language effectively. So here's what this looks like. My most recent teaching experience with children was with middle schoolers, kids who are 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. So several times a week, I would just stop the class and say, hey kids, I'm going to take 2 minutes and speak in English to share something I heard coming to school today, something about how our brains acquire a language. And then I would tell them what I'd learned. Or I'd say something like, do you know how many times we have to hear and understand a small chunk of language before it's automatically wired into our brains? 70 to 140 times. Yes, people who have been working with stroke victims to relearn their language, that's what the research shows. Or I'd say something about my own personal experience. Since I'm working on Spanish, I'd say, oh, kids, you know why I feel so frustrated at times and my speaking seems to be so messy? It's because I only have 503 hours of input under my belt. That's so little. And talking about hours, once a year with every class, whether it was kids in my previous school or now with my adult ESL learners, I can do this in simple, slow English. I walk them through the math. How many hours are they going to have with me this year? And how many hours a baby has to watch, hear, experience what I call mommy talk. The number of waking hours from birth until they turn 4. Well, I do the math and it's 14,000 plus hours with a little kid. That's how much time they have waking hours to pick up their first language. So when I walk through with my students how few hours we have, and right now, my Spanish, I have 503 hours of input that I have received trying just to understand the message. That helps them. So once a week, I would give, or I do give a little bit, just a little snippet, 1 minute at the most, a little commercial, little propaganda, you want to call it. The other thing I would do with my children who were acquiring French is once a month I'd give them a homework assignment in English to either read a finding about language acquisition or to watch part of a TED Talk about someone's experience learning another language, something like that. If I could find examples of children and their experience as told by their teacher, that I would use. And then we would reflect about it. They would have to write in English a reflection about how they apply this to themselves. So this has to be something that is ongoing, and not just for our students. The parents need this. I only had parents as a group at back to school night. So I would talk about brain research and language acquisition, because I know that their only reference is their other kids, their other children in different language classes, or their own experience. They learn the traditional old-fashioned way. So I needed to educate them and tell them that I talk about this with their students. My colleagues who were using the old-fashioned approach, I would say things winsomely, just a little morsel about what I read and my own experience with Spanish. This works really well with the Spanish teachers because they're using the traditional grammar method, and I'm telling them about my experience. And I would also do it with my principal. If I would see Jeff by the coffee pot or the copier, I'd say, "Hey, Jeff, I just heard this on a podcast coming in about blah, blah, blah." And I'd give him the 30-second elevator pitch as well. But this was ongoing, and I found that I had a lot of success in it was preventative before the pushback from parents or from students. I don't feel like I'm learning. What they meant was, I'm not doing exercises, I'm not memorizing, I'm not spitting back. That's what they think learning a language is, and that's all they know. And you can't blame them. And their peers. So then, here's my tricky part. When one of my French students would be standing in the hallway talking to one of her friends who was in Spanish, I would say to the student taking Spanish, "Hey, do y'all talk about what you did over the weekend? Or what your favorite animal is? Or do you make up creative stories like we do in French? Susie, your story about the three-legged toad who eats hamburgers, that was so much fun. What was that one detail?" And then the contrast between my students who, they made mistakes, but they could speak fearlessly in French, and we were doing all sorts of fun things. The Spanish student was saying, "No, we're working on colors," or "We're working on the verb ser or a star," something like that. Anyway, I don't want to shame anybody. I don't want to tick off anybody. But you can be winsome, but you have to be strategic. And you have to know the research. So both and one or the other, you need to be working on your own L2, your own second language, and you need to be subscribed to podcasts or blogs about second language acquisition, how that works. So so you're convinced, and then you can share appropriately what you've learned. So what do you think? Do you get much pushback from your colleagues at school, or from students, or from parents? Leave me a comment. Let's start the discussion. I'm here to help because I've been in the trenches. I'm in the trenches right now at an ESL program, a volunteer ESL program, where all the teachers use the grammar rule method. So I'm being winsomely subversive. Well, That's it for today. And my next video will be content, but I just wanted to get this out there for you since it's back to school and you might be encountering parents soon at back to school night. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching. For questions or comments, here's my email